Eleanor Vance had a secret, not a big, dramatic secret like a spy or a hidden fortune. It was a simple, quiet secret that she carried with her like a well-worn coin in her pocket. The truth was, she hadn't just worked on the fastest fighter jets in the world. She had flown them. But here, in the small, sun-baked town of Oak Haven, that secret was best kept hidden. Oak Haven was a town that lived and breathed around the nearby Air Force Base. Its people were proud, a little suspicious of outsiders, and full of stories. Eleanor had arrived 6 months ago to take a new job as the ground crew chief for the F-22 Raptor Squadron. The title, Sergeant Major, was impressive, but to many she was just the new chief, a woman in a man's world. She was in her mid-40s, with a face that looked like it had seen a few hard winters. Her eyes were a clear, serious blue, and her shoulders were always straight. She didn't talk much about her past, not because she was secretive, but because she felt there wasn't much to say. She just did her job, and she did it better than anyone. She could spot a loose bolt from 30 feet away, and she had a way of listening to an engine's hum that told her its whole story. The trouble started with Captain Miller. He was a young pilot, barely 30, and handsome in a way that had gone to his head. He had an F-22, a Raptor of his own, and he wore his flight suit like a second skin. He had a way of looking down his nose at the ground crew, as if they were all just glorified mechanics, not the guardians of his machine. He especially looked down on Eleanor. One afternoon, a bunch of the crew were gathered around a workbench, drinking lukewarm coffee from styrofoam cups. They were talking about a recent training mission. "The G-force on that last turn almost made me black out," Miller said, puffing out his chest. "I swear that jet is trying to shake me loose." "You get used to it," Eleanor said quietly, wiping grease from her hands. She hadn't meant to interrupt, but the memory of the G-force, the pressure on her chest, the world turning gray, was so vivid it had slipped out. Miller stopped and looked at her. A smirk spread across his face. "Oh, and you would know, Chief?" he asked, his voice dripping with false kindness. "You get G-force from what? Driving the forklift a little too fast?" A few of the younger crew members snickered. They didn't know her history, and Miller had a way of making people laugh at his jokes. Eleanor felt the familiar tightening in her chest. She had learned long ago that a lie was easier than the truth. "Something like that," she said, and went back to work. But Miller wasn't done. He followed her. "No, seriously, Chief, what's your story? All the old-timers say you're a legend, but you never talk about it. Did you fly those big transport planes? The C-17s? Eleanor sighed, a silent sigh that only her heart heard. "I've been around jets my whole life, Captain. That's all." Miller's smirk widened. "I bet you have. But you wouldn't know what it's like in the cockpit of one of these." He patted the side of his F-22, a graceful beast of a machine. "They're not for everyone." It was an insult, plain and simple. He was calling her weak, unskilled, unfit, the same words she had heard so many times before, the words that had forced her to a new town and a new life. She looked at the plane, at its sharp angles and its powerful engines. It was more than a machine to her. It was a part of her soul, a memory of a time she missed more than anything. "Maybe not," she said, her voice low. "But I know every bolt, every wire, every engine sensor on this bird. I know it better than you do, Captain. And I can tell you right now, your starboard engine is running a little hot. You might want to have it checked." Miller scoffed. "Running hot? Nonsense. That's a brand new engine." He shook his head and walked away, laughing. "You see?" he said to the other mechanics. "She thinks she knows more than the flight computer." "What a joke." The mockery followed her. Eleanor heard the whispers. "The old woman thinks she's a pilot. She's probably never been in a cockpit." The words were like tiny stones, not big enough to hurt one by one, but together they wore her down. She just kept her head down, her hands busy. She kept fixing engines, checking hydraulics, and making sure every Raptor that took to the sky was perfect. She lived by her work, and she let her work speak for her. Her sacrifice was a quiet one. She had given up the sky to be on the ground. She had given up the glory for the grease. And she had done it all for a reason no one knew. She had seen too many young men like Miller, full of confidence and bravado, but without the real knowledge that made a good pilot great. She had seen what happens when that confidence turns into panic. and she had paid the price for it. So she stayed on the ground, a silent guardian, a protector of the people in the sky. But the mockery hurt. It dug into a place deep inside her, a place of old wounds. She wanted to tell them the truth, to show them her wings, the ones she had earned and then put away. But she couldn't. The truth was tied to a ghost she wasn't ready to face. A ghost named Jack. One night, sitting in her small trailer at the edge of town, the radio crackling softly with base communications, she heard a sound she knew all too well. It was the frantic, high-pitched alarm that signaled a major engine failure, and then a panicked voice she also knew well. It was Captain Miller. "Control, I've got a failure. I'm losing power! My instruments are going crazy!" His voice was shaky, full of fear. The confident pilot was gone, replaced by a terrified boy. Eleanor grabbed her radio. It wasn't an official one, just a powerful scanner she used to listen in on the airwaves. She knew it was a risk. A huge risk, but a part of her, the part that had spent years in the air, knew that this wasn't just a simple equipment malfunction. The F-22 was in serious trouble, and unless someone did something fast, it was going to crash. She sat there, frozen for a moment. She could let it go. Let someone else deal with it. It wasn't her problem. She was just a ground crew chief. A liar, they had called her. But then she thought of all the people below, the quiet streets of Oak Haven, the schools, the homes. An F-22 crash was not a small thing. It was a disaster. Her hand went to the radio, her fingers tracing the transmit button. The world was telling her to stay out of it. Her past was telling her to stay out of it. But her heart, her soldier's heart, was telling her to act. She took a deep breath, and with a silent prayer, she pressed the button. The static cleared, and she spoke, her voice calm and steady. "Miller, this is Eleanor. I'm on a private channel. I can help you." The radio crackled, silence. Then a voice filled with disbelief and annoyance cut through the static. "Who is this?" "This is an emergency channel. Get off the line, whoever you are." It was a controller at the base, flustered and agitated. Eleanor ignored him. She knew they were trying to work through a series of emergency protocols, a long checklist of things to do that were all failing. She knew the clock was ticking. She spoke again, her voice cutting through the panic like a blade. "Miller, it's Eleanor Vance. Listen to me. The engine sensors you're seeing are a false reading. It's not the engine. It's the auxiliary power unit, the APU. It's overheating and messing with your main systems. You have to shut it down, now!" Another silence. Then a shocked voice. It was Captain Miller. "Eleanor? How did you—" "No, you're not a pilot. This is a joke!" He sounded terrified. He was no longer the arrogant boy from the hangar. He was just a man, high in the sky, facing a machine that had turned against him. "I don't have time to explain," Eleanor said, her voice never wavering. "Trust me. I see this problem on the ground all the time. It's a glitch in the software, not a real failure. But if that APU keeps running, it's going to cause a fire. You have to shut it down, or you're going to crash." In the control room, the commanding officer, Colonel Hayes, was listening. He had no idea who Eleanor was, but her voice had a calm, commanding tone that was hard to ignore. "Who is on that channel?" he asked his men. "We don't know, sir. It's a private frequency. We're trying to track it. Tell them to get off the line. This is a military operation." But it was too late. Miller's voice, now desperate, came over the radio. "What are the codes? I don't see anything for APU shutdown on my panel." Eleanor's voice was right there, a lifesaver in the storm. "You won't. It's not on the main control panel. It's a secondary command. Go to the maintenance menu. It's a 5-digit code. I'm telling you what to press. Just do it, Miller. Do it now!" She rattled off a series of numbers, a sequence that only a pilot or a highly skilled engineer would know. It wasn't in any manual. It was a trick, a secret that she had learned years ago, a backdoor into the jet's complex systems. Miller, against his better judgment, against his training, against his pride, started to follow her instructions. His hands, shaking uncontrollably, punched the numbers into the touchscreen. A small alarm went off. "Eleanor, it says unauthorized command," he yelled. "Ignore it!" she commanded. "It's a fail-safe. Now confirm the command." "Just hit enter!" Miller hesitated. The seconds stretched into an eternity. He could hear the grinding of the engine, the alarms blaring in his helmet. He could see the ground getting closer. He had nothing left to lose. He hit the button. A strange quiet filled the cockpit. The blaring alarm stopped. The grinding sound went away, but the jet was still falling. It worked. "But I'm still losing altitude." Miller's voice was a mix of relief and terror. Eleanor's heart hammered in her chest. She had done it. She had fixed the software glitch, but the jet was still in a terrible position. It was a brand new plane, a national treasure. But more than that, it had a man inside it. "Okay, Miller, you have limited power. You can't make it back to the base. I'm telling you what to do now. You have to save yourself. You have to eject." There was a collective gasp from the control room. "Eject? That's a billion-dollar jet. Who is this person telling him to eject?" Colonel Hayes slammed his fist on the console. "Get them off the line. Miller, do not listen to them! I repeat, do not eject." But Miller, now fully trusting the voice that had just saved his life, ignored his commander. "Where, Eleanor? Where do I eject?" Eleanor's mind raced. She looked at a map of the area she kept tacked to her wall. She knew the landscape, the hills, the forests, the farms. She knew the people, and she knew what would happen if that jet crashed into Oakhaven. "There's a lake," she said, her voice a little strained now, a hint of urgency coming through. "It's 6 miles west of your current position. I'm sending you the coordinates. It's a remote area, no people. Get there and eject over the water. The jet will be safe in the mud, and you'll have a soft landing." She sent the coordinates, a complex sequence of numbers and letters, a message that only an experienced pilot could understand. Miller read it back to her, and his voice was no longer that of a boy, but a soldier. "Understood," he said. "Miller, this is my final command. You have to trust me." She waited. "I've got you," Miller said, his voice firm and steady. "Eleanor." And then, with a thunderous roar, the F-22 turned, its last bit of power steering it toward the remote lake. The sound of the jet faded, replaced by the faint sound of an explosion in the distance. And then, a thud. The whole thing had taken less than 5 minutes. But in those 5 minutes, a hero had been made and a secret had been revealed. The flight recorder, the black box, had captured it all. It had captured Miller's fear, the controller's panic, and Eleanor's calm, steady voice, telling him exactly what to do. But the most important part of the recording wasn't just her voice. It was what came after. A second later, a voice calm and steady came over the radio again. "Miller, this is the voice of your guardian angel. Don't worry, you're in good hands." The voice was so clear and so real, but it wasn't Eleanor's. It was a man's, a ghost's. It was a voice that had not been heard in years. It was the voice of Jack. Colonel Hayes was in the control room, his eyes wide. "What? What was that? Who was that?" No one had an answer. The private channel was now silent. But the black box had recorded every second of it. The voice, the instruction, the betrayal. It had all been captured, a permanent record of a moment that would change everything. The black box was on its way, a silent witness to a truth that no one wanted to believe. And with it, a truth Eleanor had tried so hard to keep hidden would finally come out. The news spread through Oakhaven like wildfire. A hero had saved Captain Miller and sacrificed a top-secret F-22 Raptor. But no one knew who the hero was. The military, wanting to control the story, kept the details vague. A brave pilot, they said, had maneuvered the jet to a remote location. They never mentioned the voice, the instructions from the ground. Miller, in a press conference, looked pale and shaken, but he kept to the official story. He took full credit for the recovery, a brave decision he had made on his own. He was hailed as a hero. Eleanor watched it all unfold from the solitude of her trailer. The town was buzzing, but no one looked at her. They just saw the grease-stained hands and the quiet way she went about her day. They didn't see the woman who had spent a lifetime saving planes and the people inside them. A few days later, she was called to Colonel Hayes' office. He was a stern, by-the-book man who had a reputation for being fair, but also for not tolerating nonsense. He had a look on his face she had seen 100 times, a look of suspicion. "Sergeant Major Vance," he began, "I need to ask you some questions about the Miller incident." Eleanor's heart sank. She knew this was coming. "Yes, sir." "We have a transcript of the black box recording," he said, holding up a file. There was an unauthorized communication. A voice giving instructions. That voice, Sergeant Major, sounded a lot like yours. Eleanor looked him straight in the eye. It was me, sir. The colonel leaned back in his chair, a look of disbelief on his face. You? What do you mean it was you? How could you possibly have known what to do? You're a ground crew chief, not a pilot. And where did you get the codes for the secondary command? Those are highly classified. Eleanor took a deep breath. She knew she had to tell him. Sir, I know the F-22 systems, and I knew what was wrong with Miller's plane. I had to do something. But the codes, the instructions? He pressed. You can't just make that stuff up. I didn't, sir, she said, her voice firm. I was an F-22 pilot. The colonel's mouth opened slightly. A look of shock, then disbelief, then anger crossed his face. Don't lie to me, Sergeant Major, he said, his voice hard. Don't you dare lie to me. An F-22 pilot? There's no record of you ever having been a pilot. There's no record of a Sergeant Major Vance ever having flown for the Air Force. You're a mechanic and a good one, but don't try to make up some grand story to save yourself. Eleanor's eyes narrowed. I'm not lying, sir. I was an F-22 pilot a long time ago. I retired after an accident. I can prove it. But the colonel didn't believe her. He saw her as a woman who had tried to play hero and now was making up a story to get out of trouble. Her voice had sounded too calm, too knowledgeable. It was too perfect. He looked at her as if she were a child telling a fairy tale. The betrayal came from the very man she had saved. Miller, when questioned about the incident, was quick to deny her role. He was called into the colonel's office. Captain Miller, the colonel said, did you, at any point during your emergency, receive instructions from the ground from a woman named Eleanor Vance? Miller, looking nervous, shook his head. No, sir. I was trying to talk to the control tower, but the signal was weak. The only voice I heard was yours, Colonel. It was a little garbled, but I made out the coordinates you sent me. That's how I was able to find the lake. It was a perfect lie. It made him a hero, and it made the colonel a hero, too. It explained everything away, and it put the truth on a path to a dark place. And the black box? The voice? The colonel pressed. Miller shrugged. It must have been a trick of the static, sir. Or maybe a radio prank. I don't know, but I'm sure it wasn't real. Eleanor stood there, watching her life crumble. The man she had saved was now lying to save his own skin. He was a coward. The realization hit her like a physical blow. He wasn't just a liar. He was a coward, and she was paying the price for his cowardice. She was now officially under investigation. She was accused of lying to a commanding officer and of interfering with a military operation. The whole town, now with an official story to believe, turned on her. They saw her as a fraud, a sad, pathetic woman who had tried to steal glory from a real hero. Her quiet life was no longer quiet. It was filled with whispers, with sideways glances, with a coldness that felt worse than any physical pain. Her strength was tested in a way it never had been before. She could have told them the whole truth. She could have shown them her flight jacket, the one with the F-22 patch she had earned. She could have shown them the medical records, the ones that said she could never fly again. But to do that, she would have to face the ghost. The ghost that came with the voice on the black box. The ghost of her husband, Jack. Jack was her husband, her co-pilot, her soulmate. They had been a two-pilot team, the best of the best. They had flown F-22s together, a symphony of speed and power. They had been in an accident, a routine training mission gone wrong. A simple malfunction had caused them to lose control. She had managed to get them both to safety, but it had cost her the one thing she loved more than anything. It had cost her Jack. She had ejected, and he had stayed with the jet, trying to save it. He had died in the crash. The voice on the black box, the one that had said, "Don't worry, you're in good hands," was his voice. The recording had been his last words. She had retired from flying after that. The guilt, the pain, the memory of his voice was too much. She had taken a job as a mechanic, just to be close to the planes she loved, the ones that had been her life. She had hoped to forget the past, to live a quiet life, to heal. But the past had a way of coming back. Now she was a liar, a fraud, a thief of glory. She was a woman who had risked everything, her life, her career, her peace, to save a man who had betrayed her. And she was facing a court-martial, all because she had done what her heart told her to do. She had done the right thing. But the right thing she was learning didn't always come with a happy ending. It came with a sacrifice, a pain that no one else could see, and a silence that no one else could understand. The formal hearing was set for a week later. The small, sterile room in the base's courthouse was filled with faces Eleanor knew. Her fellow ground crew, the commanders, a few of the pilots, and even a few of the town's most important citizens. They were there to watch, to judge, to confirm what they already believed. Eleanor, the old woman who lied about flying jets, was finally going to get what she deserved. The prosecuting officer, a young, sharp-faced major, laid out the case against her. It was a simple case and a powerful one. He had no evidence, just Miller's testimony and the general disbelief that a ground crew chief could have the knowledge of a seasoned pilot. He painted a picture of a woman driven by ego, a woman who had seen an opportunity for glory and had taken it, no matter the consequences. He said her voice on the black box, if it was indeed hers, was just a lucky guess. He said she was a disgrace to her uniform. Eleanor sat there, her hands folded in her lap, her face a mask of calm. She listened to the lies, the half-truths, the whispered judgments. She heard the young major talk about the cost of the F-22, the risk to national security, the embarrassment to the Air Force. He made her out to be a villain. And a part of her, a deep, weary part, just wanted it to be over. She wanted to stand up and scream the truth, to show them her scars, both the visible and invisible ones. But she couldn't. Not yet. Captain Miller was called to the stand. He looked better now, his bravado returned. He wore a crisp, clean uniform, and he spoke with confidence. He told his story again, the story of his brave decision to sacrifice the jet to save himself. He said he had heard a voice, a strange, static-filled voice, but he had dismissed it. He said he had ignored it and had relied on his training and his commander's instructions to get him through the crisis. He never once mentioned Eleanor's name. He never once mentioned her clear, calm voice. "And you have no doubt in your mind, Captain Miller," the major asked, "that you were the one who made the decision to eject?" "None at all," Miller said, his voice firm and steady. "I am a pilot. I made the decision. No one else?" Eleanor watched him, and a cold, quiet anger began to build inside her. It wasn't a rage, not a fiery one. It was a slow, steady burn, the kind that came from a lifetime of injustice. She had saved this man. She had put her entire life on the line for him. And he was standing here, lying to save his own career, his own pride. He was a coward, and he was going to get away with it. It was her turn to speak. She stood up, her uniform crisp, her back straight. The room went silent. They were all waiting for her to break. They were waiting for her to cry, to beg, to confess. "Sergeant Major Vance," the major said, "do you have anything to say in your defense?" Eleanor looked out at the faces, at the disbelief and the judgment. She looked at Colonel Hayes, who now looked at her with pity and regret. He had believed her for a moment, and now he was back to seeing her as a lost cause. She looked at Miller, who refused to meet her eye, and she took a deep breath. "Yes," she said, her voice clear and strong. "I do." She looked at the panel of officers. "I did give Captain Miller instructions. I did tell him to shut down the APU, and I did tell him to eject, and I did so to save his life, and the lives of the people on the ground." A murmur went through the room. She was admitting it. She was admitting to everything. "And you believe," the major said, his voice thick with sarcasm, "that you were qualified to do so?" Eleanor's eyes locked with his. "Yes, I was." "On what grounds, Sergeant Major?" he asked, a smirk on his face. "Are you a pilot?" Eleanor stood tall. "I am a soldier, Major, and I did what a soldier is trained to do. I did the right thing. And as for my qualifications, I don't need to prove them to you. My record is my record. My actions are my actions. I have no more to say." She sat down. The room was silent. They were all stunned. She hadn't denied it. She hadn't made a flimsy excuse. She had admitted it all, and she had done so with a quiet dignity that was hard to ignore. She had put her own career on the line, her own reputation, for a man who had betrayed her. The panel of officers went into a private discussion. Eleanor knew what was coming. She knew they would find her guilty. It was all so simple. A dishonorable discharge, a public disgrace. But she had done the right thing. And that, she thought, was all that mattered. As she waited for the verdict, she looked at the window. The sun was setting, and the sky was a beautiful mix of orange and purple. She thought of Jack, of his face, of his voice, of the last time she had seen him. She thought of the sky, the endless blue expanse that had once been her home. She was about to lose it all. But she had saved a life. She had honored her code. She had honored Jack's memory. And that, she knew, was a far greater victory than any rank, any title, any badge. She closed her eyes, waiting for the final verdict. But then a voice cut through the silence. "Wait!" It was Colonel Hayes. He stood up, his face grim. He had a small black box in his hand. It was the F-22's flight recorder, and he was about to play it. The room fell silent as Colonel Hayes placed the small black box on the table. The air was thick with tension. Miller's face, a moment ago so confident, had turned pale. The major, who had built his case on the flimsiest of evidence, now looked nervous. Everyone was looking at Eleanor. But she was looking at the black box. She knew what was inside. She knew the ghost it held. And she was finally ready to face it. The colonel pressed a button. A hiss of static filled the room. Then a voice, high-pitched and full of terror, came through the speakers. It was Miller's. "Control, I've got a failure. I'm losing power. My instruments are going crazy." The voice was so raw, so full of panic that the air in the room seemed to go cold. He was not the hero he had pretended to be. He was a terrified boy. Then a new voice, a calm, steady voice, cut through the panic. It was Eleanor's. "Miller, this is Eleanor. Listen to me. The engine sensors you're seeing are a false reading. It's not the engine. It's the auxiliary power unit, the APU. It's overheating and messing with your main systems. You have to shut it down, now." The voice was so clear, so precise, so full of authority. It was the voice of a pilot, not a mechanic. The major looked at Miller, his face a mix of shock and confusion. Miller's face was now a mask of fear. He was watching his lies, his carefully constructed story, fall apart. He was watching his reputation, his pride, his entire career turn to dust. The recording went on. Eleanor's instructions, her calm reassurance, her knowledge of a secret code. The sounds of a jet turning, a last desperate act of a soldier trying to save a life. Then the most damning part of the recording came. "You have to eject." Eleanor's voice was now strained but still steady. And then Miller's voice. "Where, Eleanor? Where do I eject?" He was asking her for help. He was trusting her with his life. "There's a lake. It's 6 miles west of your current position. Get there and eject over the water." The recording ended with the sounds of the ejection, a single sharp thud. The room was silent, a thick, heavy silence. The major looked at Colonel Hayes, his face white. But what about his testimony?" the major stammered. "He said he didn't hear her." "He said—" The colonel didn't answer him. He pressed another button. A new voice, a man's voice, came from the speaker. It was calm and steady, full of love and reassurance. A voice that had not been heard in years. "Miller, this is the voice of your guardian angel. Don't worry, you're in good hands." The words were the last recorded on the black box, and they were a ghost's. The colonel looked at Eleanor. His face was no longer full of doubt or suspicion or pity. It was full of respect. "Sergeant Major Vance," he said, his voice low and serious. "The flight recorder has something else. A unique signature. A phrase that only an F-22 pilot would know. A phrase that you used to confirm your identity to Captain Miller. A code that was not in any manual. It was a private code you and your co-pilot, your husband, had created. Am I right?" Eleanor's eyes welled up with tears. She nodded, her voice choked with emotion. "Yes, sir." The colonel turned to the rest of the room. Sergeant Major Eleanor Vance was one of the first female F-22 pilots in the history of the United States Air Force. She was one of the best. She was a legend. She was a hero. And she was right. And Captain Miller— He paused and looked at Miller, who had collapsed in his chair, his head in his hands. "Captain Miller, you are under formal investigation for lying to a commanding officer and misrepresenting facts in an official report." The room was in an uproar. The townspeople who had come to watch a liar get her comeuppance now looked at Eleanor with awe and regret. The mechanics who had mocked her now looked at her with respect. The major, who had tried to build a case against her, now looked like a fool. The truth finally had come out. Eleanor was not a liar. She was a hero. She was not a thief of glory. She was a woman who had given up everything to stay close to a memory she couldn't let go of. She had sacrificed her honor, her peace, her career to save a man who had betrayed her. And she had done so with a quiet dignity that was far more powerful than any lie. In the end, she was not just exonerated. She was a hero again, but she didn't want the title, the glory, the parades. She just wanted to be a soldier again. The colonel offered her a promotion, a chance to be a commanding officer, a chance to train the next generation of pilots. She smiled, a rare, genuine smile. "No, sir," she said. "I'm where I'm supposed to be. On the ground. My hands are dirty, but my soul is clean. I'm a mechanic, and I'm proud of it." And that was the final, most satisfying twist of all. The truth had set her free, not by returning her to the sky, but by allowing her to be who she was meant to be. A quiet guardian, a protector of the people in the sky, and a legend who finally got the respect she had always deserved.